What's up, bitches?
Let's talk about crime.
What's up, bitches?
Hello.
So we're here. We're in a whole new podcasting setup. We're not even 100% done with it, but we're here. We're going to see how this works. We've now got our, we're just sitting next to each other instead of across from each other. So
Yeah, because I went and got a new bed. So my bed that was originally in this room is out, but they bought a new bed. That's also a couch.
Yep.
Hence why we're sitting next to each other. And we also have Olive and Oreo in between us as well. So
that we do.
They're our special guest stars today.
So I don't really have anything else that I need to say, do, whatever. I don't know. Do you have anything you want to talk about? I don't have anything true crime related. Nothing too crazy new going on in the world. So, we can get right into our story.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're talking about the year 1969. A woman named Joan Hill is found dead in her home. This happened in Houston, Texas. And that's all I'm going to tell you because this is a story that you literally just have to hear because there's so many moving parts and moving pieces. Remember the one that we just recently did that was about, all the different people who were interlinked and intertwined in the murder? So this is similar to that, but not the same. This is, this is two things. Number one, it's a story you have to just hear. But number two, I'm going to just apologize to you.
They fucking get released, huh?
No.
Okay.
In reality, this case could be considered unsolved.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm apologizing because I said I would never do an unsolved. But you see, when I start researching and I'm a quarter of the way through or halfway through and I'm like, damn it, I'm not going back over it. So just deal with it. So we're going to give a little background anyways. Joan was born Joan Olive Robinson. She was born on February 6th, 1931 in Houston, Texas. Now her father was Davis Ashton Ash Robinson. Throughout this whole story, he is going to be named Ash because literally everybody called him Ash. Now, Ash initially went to school for dentistry, but he literally did not like it. He didn't like what he was learning. He didn't like what he was doing. So he ends up dropping out. And he essentially becomes a self-made millionaire by getting into the oil industry. And he he was a risk taker and it paid off for him in the end. Now Ash marries a woman named Rhea Gardere in July of 1919. And shortly after they get married, it is discovered that Rhea cannot have children. So the couple decides, I think we should adopt because they wanted to have kids, but they couldn't. Now, in March of 1931, the Robinsons actually adopted 1 month old Joan Olive. So that's why she was Joan Olive. I don't know. Now, Joan started riding horses at the age of 3 because I guess when you're rich, riding horses is what you do.
That's where every rich person has a fucking horse.
Especially in the 20s, 30s, 40s, because that was the thing, right? But not only did she start riding horses, but she was really fucking good at it. At the age of 5, she won her first ribbon in horse riding. She placed 3rd place in a competition at 5. And then by the age of 7, she was actually regularly competing in competitions all the time. And she literally won 1st and 2nd in all of these competitions. She did this from 1938 to 1945. So she was she was killing it. So then she ends up going to college, right? She gets a little older. She goes to college. She goes to Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri. She was literally an average student and she had a fantastic social life. So she was just kind of living the life. Now, at one point, she is actually asked by the Metro Goldwyn Mayer, which is back in the day, producers for movies, the people who would produce Wizard of Oz or the people who would produce for Disney. That's Metro Goldwyn was one of those. They actually approached her and wanted her to do a screen test to become a movie star because she was beautiful, talented. And so she was kind of cool. And her dad was absolutely not. Abso-fucking-lutely not, because Hollywood is full of bad influences and I don't want those on.
Good on you, Dad.
True story. True. Now, while she's in college, she actually gets married twice.
God Damn.
Now, both of these were before the age of 20. So she got married twice before the age of 20. Now, her first husband was Spike Benton, and he actually was a Navy pilot, and he had like a super promising career in the Navy. And then she also married a man named Cecil Burglass, and Cecil was actually a childhood friend of hers and a lawyer. Her father did not approve of any of these like marriages. He was like, bitch, you are in college. Like, focus on your studies. Now, each one of her marriages literally lasted like 6 months. So he's kind of like, good riddance, fellas. Now, Joan ends up competing professionally. So again, she's been riding horses since she was 3. And she is deciding to become a professional competition or equestrian horseback riding person. From the 1950s to the 1960s, she was competing like for like that. I mean, a long time. And she was very successful. She was also very like famous. A lot of people knew who she was. Now, on September 28th, 1957, Joan actually marries a man named Dr. John Hill, who is a plastic surgeon. And I watched a documentary, of course. And from what I can tell, pretty much everybody who ran in the circle with Joan, because again, Joan was like an equestrian. She had a fuckload of money. So she ran with like the elite of the elite in Houston. And pretty much nobody liked him. They didn't like him. They didn't think she should be marrying him because they thought he was wanting to marry her for her money. But I mean, he was a plastic surgeon, but she had like an ungodly amount of money. Now, John Robert Hill, so this is who she marries. He was born in 1931 in Edcouch, Texas. He was the second of 3 children, and he was born to a farmer, Robert Raymond Hill, and his wife, Myra Hannah Hill. He was raised in a very strict religious household. He was a fantastic piano player, and he actually ended up being really musically talented like through his life. Now, he does go on to study liberal arts at Abilene Christian College of Abilene, Texas. And then he goes on and attends Baylor College for medicine in Houston. So he goes and gets a liberal arts degree and then transfers into another school to become a doctor. Now, when he graduates and he takes his residency, he takes it in surgery at Houston's Herman Hospital. Now, originally, he wanted to be a cardiac surgeon. But after realizing that like the cardiac surgeon was very popular. There was a lot of cardiac surgeons and they were coming up with a bunch of new ways that you can do cardiac surgery. And so he was like, you know what? This is kind of oversaturated. So he ends up exploring and deciding to do plastic surgery instead. So that's how he becomes a plastic surgeon. Now, he did have one incident where he actually almost lost his ability to be a doctor while he was in his residency because he perforated a patient's bowel and did not close it back up before he stitched the person back up. And that patient ended up dying. And it was...
Yeah, that shit's serious.
Yeah.
Holy.
And it was discovered in the autopsy that the bowel had been perforated. So they were like, what
that
the fuck?
Fucking sucks.
Now.
What a literal shitty way to die.
He literally got a fucking stern talking to and was like, be on your merry way. Continue your residency. That should have been immediate. Like, no. Nope. You're not cut out for this shit. He ends up doing his shit and he gets through his residency and he ends up partnering with a man named Nathan Roth, and Nathan and him decide they're going to open up their own clinic together and they're going to do plastic surgery together. However, there are some problems at this as well. Like, for instance, he neglects at one point to tell a patient that a drill bit had broken off in their jaw during their operation, and he left it in their face.
What the fuck?
He wasn't a good doctor.
Clearly.
Now, this ends up getting discovered. And again, he is given the benefit of the doubt because not too long prior to this incident, his brother had actually committed suicide. And so they felt like maybe his grief had like affected his actions. But
then
he
take time off work, motherfucker.
Should have never been able to be a doctor. Like ever. Now,
2 strikes, bro.
Exactly. Now, Nathan Roth and John actually do part ways in 1967, and John ends up opening his own practice. Now, the reason they decide to part ways is because John and Roth cannot get along on pretty much anything, and John's idea of how things should be run and Roth's idea don't match. And also, don't forget the fact that John keeps fucking up on patients.
I was gonna say Roth probably had it golden, and then John's
he's like,
fucking
fuck that guy.
numbnut.
Yeah. Now, after Joan and John get married, they establish themselves in Houston's social scene. Although they lived pretty separate lives, they were very high on the elites of Houston. And for about the first 6 years of their marriage, they actually lived on Joan's father's property in like a home. Now, they moved, but that was only once John had actually come up with the idea that they move. And then Joan was like, yeah, I mean, that's fine. And she continued to ride her horses and compete and do an equestrian. And he continued to be his doctor. And so the problem was their schedules were so different. The other thing is in John's free time. So like I'm married, and in my free time or in your dad's free time, we typically hang out together. Well, in John's free time, he decided to have music recitals. Like he would hold music recitals at their home, not spending time with Joan, but just because he loved music. That was his ultimate passion. But he did the surgeon thing because that was just what he went to school for. But he really was so into the music stuff. So he would hold recitals and have a bunch of people over to their house in any time he had free time and hold recitals for other people. So they just didn't have a good connection, I don't think. Then in June 14th, 1960, Joan actually gives birth to their son, Robert Ashton Hill. And he was immediately nicknamed Boot by the grandpa Ash. Ash and Boot. Now, Joan's father, Ash, again, buys her a farm because at this point, I don't know if she's dwindling down from the equestrian stuff because she had a child, or if she's just like wanting to add more to her resume of things that she does. But she had told her dad that she wanted to breed horses and she wanted to start a riding school. And so her dad bought her this farm because he was like, okay, yeah. Because the other thing is, it was very much said that Ash bought Joan everything she ever wanted. All she had to do was say she wanted it.
Well, she was the only child. So
she was.
That makes
and
sense.
She was like a prize child because she was their adopted child. She's the only child they had. So yeah, he spoiled the shit out of her.
And pretty fucking talented too.
And she was talented. And her idea was a good idea. She wanted to start this thing because it was her passion was riding horses, but you can't ride horses forever. And now she has a child. So how is she going to travel, compete, practice, and all that stuff if she is still having to deal with children, right? Then in 1965, they actually buy their first home. And they buy it in a really wealthy neighborhood of River Oaks in Houston. Now, this is actually only a few blocks away from Joan's family because they live in this super nice neighborhood. Now, John actually wanted to turn one of the bedrooms in the house into a music room. Fair enough, right? That's like my thought is like, okay, cool. Now he goes...
It's like his man cave.
Right. Except for he goes to Ash and he's like, hey, can I borrow $10,000? Remind you, this is the 60s. Okay. Can I borrow $10,000 because I would like to create a music room in my home? To which Ash says, abso-fucking-lutely not, because first of all, you still owe me money from buying the house because John borrowed money from Ash to buy their home. And then he says, and also, that's a fucking ridiculous thing to spend $10,000 on. Okay, so this is what Ash's response is. So John ends up going to a bank, gets a loan, he pays off Ash, and then he takes out the loan for a larger amount so that he can start to create his music room. Now, he was all in with this music room, and as of March of 1969, remember, this was 1965 when he went and asked for the money. So this is 4 years later. His room is almost complete. And it had a running total at that time of $100,000 that he had spent on this music room. And it is a glorious music. Now, there is a documentary and they actually are in this house and they can show you the music room. And it's like gold and fucking like it's beautiful, but still a little excessive.
Listen, if I had $100,000,
I wouldn't be.
That's not what I'd be fucking spending it on.
Absolutely not. Now, in 1968, Joan and John actually separate. Well, let me rephrase that. John actually leaves Joan, like he leaves her. Now, John had actually started to engage in an affair with a woman named Ann Kurth, and that was going on for a while, and he ends up leaving Joan to be with Ann. Well, he actually leaves a note to Joan because she had been away at a horse show, and when she came home, she found this note, and the note had actually said, I'm leaving because things are not good between us. That's it. That's how he left. Now, 2 weeks later, he actually asks to meet with Joan, and he tells her that he was having an affair and that he was being blackmailed because of it. And then in November of 1968, the two of them are still separated, And John actually has Joan served with divorce papers. Now, Ash had also hired a private investigator because he wanted to find out all the dirt he could on John to make this divorce go the best possible way. Well, the private investigator finds that not only is John still with Ann Kurth, but he actually bought an apartment literally like not too far from her house so that they can continue their relationship. And he tells Joan, so Ash tells Joan that he found this out. He's not, he's with Ann or that lady. He's even got an apartment over by her. Like, you need to let this guy go. To which Joan is like, no, I'd like to make my marriage work. And so she actually,
nah, fuck that.
I know. She actually contests the divorce. So she refuses to sign the divorce papers and she's contesting it. Now, shortly after this happens in December, the two of them end up reconciling and they get back together. However, I will tell you that I did read an article that talked about how the reason they got back together was because supposedly Ash went to John and basically said, if you do not reconcile with my daughter, I will sue you for all this money. Or I think he said he would sue him for all this money because there was all this money that he still owed him. And he would say, he said, I will demand you start making payments back to me or I will sue you to take your money. So either you stay with my daughter or you give me my money back now. And supposedly he was like, okay. So the next day he like goes and reconciles. So I don't know if that's true. That was one of the things that was said. Now, John did not stop his affair with Anne. And they find this out later, but in the moment they didn't know because he had told Joan that he had stopped the affair and that he was going to reconcile. So this brings us to the spring of 1969. Now, Joan has some guests. I mean, both the family, they have these two women that are guests at the house and they have all these plans and Joan starts to get really sick. And I mean, like, really sick. There's no reason. Like, she was young. She was super healthy. And just out of the blue, she gets fucking sick. Like, puking, diarrhea, unable to hold down any liquids, complete dehydration, can't stay awake. Just really fucking sick. And the two women that were staying at Joan's house had said that at one point, the day before she got sick, Joan had actually told them because she went to bed and then woke up the next morning. They were there. I mean, they had been there the night before, but like she went to bed early and she had told them like, oh yeah, John gave me these 2 pills and it just knocked me out. Like I couldn't even get up, whatever. And then later that day, she starts getting super fucking sick. And so they're kind of like, what's going on? Then the two guests go and check on her multiple times because she's so sick she can't even get out of bed. One of the maids who helped around the house said at one point she went to check on her and she was like covered in feces because she was so sick she could not get out of bed. She was vomiting on herself and she was basically shitting all over herself and she couldn't control it. And then John took Boots, which is their son, the two guests, they went out on the town, they had dinner. All while she's this sick at home, right? The maid goes in to check on her again and she goes to bring her like liquids and stuff. And when she goes in there, she's like dead asleep. And so she goes to wake her up and she does wake up, but she rolls her over and there is just like crusted vomit and diarrhea on the bed. And she's like, so I'm trying to get her out of the bed to change over the sheets and to help her. And she can't even stand up. And so she's turning blue because she like can't breathe. So she lays her back down and immediately runs to John. And she's like, we need to do something. And so John's kind of like, I think she's going to be okay. She might just have the flu. And so he's kind of like, I think we'll wait it out. And they're like, no, like she's like dying. Like we need to bring her. He's like, oh, fine. I'll bring her to the hospital. So John ends up taking her to the hospital, but he chooses to take her to a very small hospital in Sharpstown. Now this hospital is 45 minutes from their home. And this hospital was fairly new and it did not have certain capabilities that you would necessarily want to take your loved one to when your loved one's literally dying and can't like function.
And I'm sure there was a closer fucking hospital.
No, so there was. Supposedly this was the closest. However, There was a hospital, Texas Med. Now, everybody literally everybody said there is literally no reason that he took her to Sharpstown, because at the time Sharpstown was such a brand new hospital. They didn't even have all of their equipment in yet. And so to take her to Texas Med would have just been a few more minutes longer. Okay. That's all it would have taken. Few more minutes longer.
That would have had the equipment.
She would have been at a state-of-the-art hospital for the time.
And they got the money.
Okay, so one of the ladies that was interviewed, who was actually one of her friends back in the day, but she's super high elite in Houston still, she said, we all were like, why would you take her to Sharpstown? Money is no object. And the big question was, why did you not call an ambulance? Like, why did you have to bring her, and why did you wait so long, right? So there's all these questions, right? Now, at first, it is believed that she has a foodborne illness. So the doctors take one look at her and like, well, I think she's got food poisoning. However, as she's in the hospital, she continues to get worse. They do all the things that you would normally do, IVs, whatever, for food poisoning, and she just gets worse. Then a different doctor comes in and says, I think she could be in septic shock, which I know can kill people, right? And then they start doing tests and blood tests and stuff, and they realize that her kidneys are also starting to fail. Now, one of the things they would have needed to do to help save her was put her on dialysis because her kidneys were failing. Sharpstown did not have a dialysis machine because they were too new.
How convenient.
And they did not have the things they needed. They had talked about transferring
It's almost
her.
like he's a doctor and knows this shit.
They talked about transferring her to Texas Med, but it was like, yeah, she's so sick, like she'll probably not even make it. So then on March 19th, 1969, Joan dies in the hospital of her condition because it continued to get worse. And it is still unknown to this day what actually killed her. They do not know. Now, there was an autopsy because apparently Texas law is that an autopsy is required before embalming and burial if the person died in the hospital. So they are required by law to do an autopsy. So less than 4 hours after her death, Joan was moved to the funeral home where they began to embalm her. So the medical examiner shows up to the funeral home because obviously that's where he's going to do his autopsy. And when he walks in, he's like, what the fuck? She's already been embalmed. So he did do an autopsy, but because she's already embalmed, it kind of fucks up a lot of the shit that you could be looking at, right? And
yeah, because that is the point, to give you cause of death.
Exactly. So he does conclude that what he thought is that she had died of pancreatitis.
Holy fucking hell.
Now, Ash was like, absolutely not. He did not.
I'm with you, Ash, man.
He did not believe it because he actually took that and he went to multiple of his doctor friends and they were like, listen, most people in the world do not die of pancreatitis, and the fucking symptoms she had were not pancreatitis type symptoms.
And I work in veterinary medicine. I don't work in human medicine, but I don't think kidney failure and pancreatitis are linked.
Right.
Like, at least in animals, I'm like almost 100% certain that is not linked.
Yes. So now Ash decides, no, this motherfucker poisoned my daughter. So Ash starts accusing John of poisoning her. So Ash, because he has a lot of money, Ash demands another autopsy. So they're like, okay, we'll do another one with a different person. So another autopsy is performed right before she's actually buried. Now, it is found that she is free from poison. There's no poison in her blood. I guess not blood, because there's no blood in the body. So there's nothing they could tell that would say she was poisoned. But they now think that she died from acute focal hepatitis. Okay, so now they have a different diagnosis. Now, again, Ash is like, no, like you're telling me some shit. But you're
also, I know this was the 60s, but you're also telling me that they didn't have leftover blood that they could have.
I don't think they did the proper procedures for her. And
obviously not. Look she got embalmed before the fucking autopsy.
And you'll hear why I think they didn't do the proper procedures. But again, Ash is like, I'm not fucking, you just fucking took my only daughter who is healthy as hell from me. And I know it had something to do with you, John, because you didn't even want to be married to her, right? So again, Ash is like, no, I would like to have another autopsy. So they do another autopsy. Now, this autopsy is actually performed by 10 fucking doctors. And they find that she died from, this is what their finding is that she died from a massive infection, but the source of the infection was unknown. Okay, so that's what they said. Now, the listed cause of death was meningitis and sepsis. That's what they listed it as. And it was noted that the delay in her care and the intervention, like the delay in her care and intervention by her husband, the fact that he didn't bring her to the hospital, the fact that he made her sit there and be sick for like 24 hours completely like on her deathbed, did factor into her death. So they're basically saying like, you should have gotten her help sooner. If you remember, I said this happened in March 19th of 1969 is when she died. In June of the same year, he goes ahead and marries Ann Kurth. So to me, that always is like the key. When you have somebody die and then 3 months later, you are married to your fucking lover, I'm thinking you might have had something to do with her death. Now, shortly after he gets married, he is arrested and he is indicted on murder charges of Joan Hill. Now, first, a grand jury, because I don't know if they still do it like this, but back then you had to bring this case before the grand jury and then they would decide if they want to indict and actually do a trial. So the jury's given the information. And in the summer of 1969, they're like, nah, you don't have a case. So they drop the charges. So then the case is then put in front of a second grand jury where they decide to exhume her body because they're like, okay, something needs to, click here. And that one again was like, nah, like we don't see a cause for him to be charged. Like, what are you trying to charge him with? He didn't kill. There's no proof of killing. Then in February of 1970, a third grand jury, this was brought to. During this third grand jury trial, Ann Kurth supposedly came forward and testified that her husband, John Hill, had admitted to killing Joan. She also said that he had also tried to kill her on 3 different occasions. So while it was believed that he murdered her, there still was not enough evidence that he actually murdered Joan, even with Ann Kurth's testimony. So they actually charge him with failing to provide adequate care, which resulted in her death. That's what they decide they're going to charge her with. The grand jury votes and they decide 10-2 to indict him. So now they can take him to trial. Now, the official charge was murder by omission. That's what the actual charge was called, because murder by omission basically saying you didn't get her care, so she died. Okay. So his trial starts February 15th, 1971. Anne testifies that John tried to kill her by crashing their car into a bridge, and then he tried to inject her with something within a hypodermic syringe. So she says he wrecked into a bridge and then turned to me, had this syringe and tried to inject me with something, and like I fought him off. She also then states that he had confessed to her that he had killed Joan, and she stated that he had said that he actually would lace the pastries because during the time that she got really sick, she had those friends. One of the things that the friends kept saying is, oh, that Dr. John was so nice. He would come every morning with a plate of chocolatey eclairs just for Joan. She loves them, and he would bring them just for her every day for like a couple of days that they were there. And so what he supposedly said is that he had actually laced those chocolate eclairs with an infectious bacteria that he had been growing in his home. And then once she started to get kind of sick, he actually injected her with this same bacteria that he knew would kill her because it was an infectious bacteria that he grew. So that's what Ann Kurth says, which to me...
Did I fucking believe her?
I believe her, right? I do. Now, unfortunately, because she did this testimony and she said that he tried to kill her and that he admitted to killing Joan, the lawyer for John was like, excuse me, he's not on trial for murder. He's on trial for murder by omission. And we're talking about the fact that she didn't get medical care soon enough. And this lady's over here trying to say that he poisoned her with an infectious disease. And the judge was like, you are correct, mistrial. So they do set a new trial date, though, because when you have a mistrial, you can just retry. So they have a new trial date. The trial date is set for November 1972. So now you got to wait. On September 24th, 1972, John Hill is shot and killed by a masked gunman during a robbery at the mansion that he lives in, which happened to be the mansion that was his because, even though it's technically half ashes because he paid for it, but this was their home that they lived in.
Ash paid somebody.
Did you do the research on this?
No, but I just know what I would do if I was a parent.
Goodness.
Or what you would do as my parent.
So, John Hill is shot. Now, his eyes, nose, and mouth are covered with tape, and he is beaten and shot 3 times in the chest, shoulder, and right arm. Now, the bad part of this is his 12-year-old son was there during this attack and also like kind of saw his dad dead. And all of them. So at this time, John had remarried again because him and Anne had divorced. So he remarried again. He had his son and his mother. They were all living in this mansion. Connie, which is John Hill's new wife, his third wife, Connie and John were gone at a medical conference. And apparently while they were gone, these people showed up that were wearing masks, masked men, came in, broke into the house, and tied up the mother, the son, Boots, the son, and basically sat and waited for John and Connie to come home. John and Connie come home. They attack John. They tie up and attack both of them. They end up killing John. And then the 12-year-old boy, Boots, he was in the other room when his dad died, but he actually, as soon as there was like a neighbor who had heard something, and so he came rushing over. Well, when he came in, the kid was like, he had freed his feet enough to be able to like bounce. Like he freed himself off of a chair and he was like hopping over to his dad's body. And he had his mouth had been taped, and his mouth was no longer taped, and he started crying and telling the neighbor guy like they shot and killed my daddy. Like he knew. So that's at the end of the day, that regardless of what happened, like that totally sucks. But he saw it. Now Connie and Robert, which is his son, so Boots, Connie and Boots actually believed that Ash was behind the killing. They actually ended up filing a $7.6 million wrongful death lawsuit against Ash because there was nothing that could prove Ash did anything. So this was their best way to try to do it. Now, they claimed that he had ordered John be killed. Now, of course, Ash denied having anything to do with this, and a 1977 jury cleared Ash of any wrongdoing. Now, an investigation is done into the matter of John Hill's death. Now, they do find a gun, like off in a field somewhere in like a briefcase from the burglary, right? Because they supposedly stole stuff. Well, they stole like nothing really, but whatever. So they find this briefcase. There's a gun inside. And the gun, they find, this is the same gun that killed John Hill. So they trace the gun and they trace it back to a doctor. And they go and talk to the doctor. And the doctor says, yeah, that's my gun, but that was stolen from me fucking months ago. And they're like, oh, well, how do you think? What? Yeah, that's my gun. Because this gun came from like, it wasn't in the same state. Like they were like, this doctor did not live in the state in Houston, or did not live in Houston. He might have lived in Texas, but not in Houston. And they're like, how did it travel so far? And he goes, this goddamn whore. This goddamn whore stole it. So he had been out like doing whatever with whoever. And this girl stole his damn gun. Okay. But I didn't want to report it, by God. And so he tells him, like, he said, it's stolen by Marcia McKittrick, and she's a fucking whore. She stole that gun. So they look for Marcia McKittrick, and they find out that Marcia McKittrick has a boyfriend, and her boyfriend's name is Bobby Wayne Vandiver. Now, they start putting 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 5 and 5 together, and they're like, let me think about this. And so they talk to Bobby Wayne. They talk to McKittrick. And yeah, they basically are like, oh yeah, Bobby, you killed the man. You killed him, like, period. So he's accused of murdering John Hill. Now, he is arrested in 1973. And when he first gets arrested, he's like, I have nothing to say about anything. Like, don't even talk to me. He's not going to cooperate. But that is until they show this man to John's mother, who says, yes, that is the man who came in and robbed our home. Because yes, he had a mask on, but there were points where he did not. And that is the fucking man. And so Vandiver ends up admitting to the murder, and he actually implicates 2 other people for this murder. He says that Marcia McKittrick and Lilla Paulus, who weirdly enough also happened to be an acquaintance of Ash, they had something to do with it. He also tells them that the reason he murdered John Hill was purely a business transaction. And he said he was told he was supposed to kill a doctor who had killed his wife. That's what he says. Now, Vandiver's trial was set for September 1973. So he's getting ready to go to trial.
Let the man go.
Now, this ends up getting changed to April 1974 because they had some complications. But Vandiver never actually shows up to his trial. And they're like, what the fuck? So they start looking for him and they find out that he had actually left town. He moved to another city. He adopted a new name. And when he went to this new city, there was an officer in the town and he was like, this new guy's a little weird. I think I want to do a little bit of info searching on this man. And he went up to Van Diver and was like, hey, like, I don't think you're who you say you are. And Van Diver's like, leave me the fuck alone, and pulls a gun out so the officer kills him. So that's now two people who were supposed to go to trial that were shot and killed before they could go to trial, right? For this death, right? Now, McKittrick, so his girlfriend, actually does corroborate Van Diver's story. She says, yes, he did it. Yes, I had something to do with it. Yes, he was hired to pay. He was actually given $25,000 to do this, and he gave $5,000 to me and $5,000 to Lilla Paulson. And it was because Ash wanted revenge for his daughter's death. And he wanted his daughter to be avenged by killing this guy who killed his daughter. So she is convicted in 1974 of being the getaway driver because she does say, like, listen, I drove them to and from, like, blah, blah, blah. She actually receives a 10-year sentence. And of course, she only gets 5 years. She only does fucking 5 years because that's how we live our life in this world. Now, Lilla Paulus was also convicted. Now, she did not sign a plea deal because McKittrick did. She did. Paulus was like, no, I didn't have anything to do with this. She refused. She wouldn't do anything. She ends up getting a 35-year sentence. And I don't know like what her part was in it, but she got a 35-year sentence. And she actually, unfortunately, died of breast cancer in prison on May 16th, 1986. So she didn't even live like a full life behind bars or anything. Now, even though it was stated by McKittrick and it was stated by Bobby that Ash was the one who paid Van Diver or paid Bobby to kill John, and both McKittrick and Paulson, so the two women, were given lie detector tests after they sat there and said, yeah, you know, this was for hire. They both passed lie detector tests. But because lie detector tests are not admissible in court, nothing happened to Ash because they could not find a solid enough link to link Ash to the murder of John.
You know, I'm not upset about that.
I'm
not going to lie.
I'm not either.
I was hoping that they would get away with it.
So I thought I had wrote it in here, but I didn't. One of the biggest reasons why I firmly believe that John had done something to Joan is because not only did he choose that hospital to go to, knowing that it was a newer hospital, but that is actually the hospital he worked at. So he worked out of that hospital as a plastic surgeon. So he would know if they had dialysis machines. He would know if they had all the right things and tools that were needed to treat his wife.
He had to have done something because there's no way that just overnight randomly just so happens that he's back in the life. And all the shit was happening with the affair that he was having. Like, that's why it shocks me because I'm just kind of like,
I mean, I do think if he had gone to trial and not been killed, he would have been found guilty. I totally think he would have been found guilty. There was a lot of evidence. Again, they weren't trying to try him for murder. They were trying him for murder by omission, which he would not have served a super long sentence, but he would have still served a sentence for it. Now, the final part of this is in 1979. Ash and Rhea Robinson actually leave Texas and they move to Florida. Now, at that time, Robert Hill, which is the grandson, Boots, wanted nothing to do with his grandfather because he thought his grandfather had his father killed. And
yeah, well, your dad killed your mom.
I know. And see, that's the thing was, though, the only people he had on his side was his current stepmother, who would never think that her husband would have killed somebody. And then the mom, John's mom, who's like, no, your dad would never have done this. However, by 1981, Robert had actually reconciled with his grandparents. And he actually went and lived with them.
Good.
So that tells me there's something else to this story.
Some truth had to have come out. And
something had to have come out.
It could have been the second wife.
Yeah.
Too, like she had, maybe Ash reached out to her and was like, hey,
something
fucking help me,
something definitely happened. And then Ash actually died February of 1985 when he was 87, and Rhea died in 1987 when she was 86. So they lived like a full ass life afterwards. I 150 million% think that not only do I think John absolutely killed his wife, but I totally 100% think that Ash hired a hitman because when I watched the documentary, the one of the defense attorneys who was supposed to defend John Hill in his case had said Ash had so many contacts and he had so many people that he could reach out to. We 100% think that Ash was completely behind the killing. And the one thing that the guy said, which I'm going to put this out here, I'm not saying that I agree, but I'm going to tell you what the guy said was his problem with Ash getting away with murder, because he absolutely thinks that Ash got away with murder, is we the people are not allowed to be the executioner of somebody. And he said, not, that because that guy, the defense attorney firmly believed that, which I don't know fucking why he did, but he firmly believed that Dr. John Hill did not poison or inject his wife with anything. He just thought, he didn't get her help soon enough, but did he deserve to die for that? That's kind of what he said.
Yeah.
And I'm out here like, yep.
Yeah, because it's not like they were some like fucking 85-year-old couple that could barely fucking move or had issues. Like
there was no reason.
They
for
were
her to
a
be
young,
sick like that.
healthy couple that had marital problems.
Yep.
That he apparently took it upon himself to be a fucking piece of shit.
Well, because also, what did he gain out of it? Let's see. He gained a home. He gained a ton of
new wife. Two of them.
Yeah, 2 new wives. He also gained
his son,
full custody of his son. He also gained all of the money from his wife, who literally was way richer than him.
Well, he kind of doesn't have to deal with Ash anymore.
And he doesn't. Well, exactly.
In a way, because he had already paid Ash off at that point.
Well, he had borrowed more money from Ash apparently at some point because he still owed him money. But here's the other thing. And this is my final little like dig about it. This man was a fucking doctor. I don't care if he was a plastic surgeon doctor. He went to medical school. He was going to be a cardiac surgeon, for fuck's sake, okay, for residency, which when you think about this for a minute, when you're in school, that's where you learn all the things. And then when you graduate school, you go into residency and that's where you practice your shit for like 3 years. So his learning part was already done. He just practiced in plastic surgery instead of, cardiac surgery, right? You're a fucking doctor, dude. You're a fucking doctor. Your wife was so incredibly sick and you literally chose to do nothing. You are a doctor. If you were not a doctor, I could have maybe given you a pass and be like, yeah, maybe he really just thought she would get over it. You're a doctor. You know the signs to look for in dehydration. You know vomiting and diarrhea all over yourself and not being able to stand up and not being able to stay awake. Lethargic people is a huge fucking red flag. You're a doctor.
Right. But my thing is even if you weren't a doctor, anybody in the right mind, if they saw that somebody in that severe of a state, would take them to a hospital.
If you love them.
And then I could say, wouldn't fault you for taking them to just the closest hospital.
I agree.
Right? Like,
I agree.
And the ambulance thing, I'm kind of like 50-50 on it. Because if you really love somebody and you're in a panic, sometimes that's not your first train of thought. Right. Like for us, our family's house is so close to a hospital that like we probably would never call an ambulance.
When you have a 45-minute drive, you would think an ambulance would be your best option because at least they can start fluids. They can do fluid. No, that's okay. They can do fluids. They can do IVs. They can do blood stuff. They can do things to help stabilize. On her. Absolutely, for that 45-minute drive. So that was the whole thing. It's very suspicious. But again, there is no true ending. Like, I mean, there's an ending because obviously, but I found it interesting that it was like,
no, we know the true ending.
Oh, we do. But I mean, there is no statistical, factual evidence. But we know from based on the things is that John killed Joan. And then Bobby killed fucking John at the hands of Ash. Man. And then some sheriff in some small town killed Bobby. And Ash is behind majority of it. And that motherfucker lived a great life.
Watch it be some wild like bombshell drop. And it's like Ash is behind just fucking all of it. And just wanted the grandson in the
Listen,
end.
I'm not going to lie. I saw Ash. The thing about Ash that made him very different than pretty much everybody else in the social elite of Houston is not only was he a self-made millionaire, so that means that he did not come from fucking family money. So he built that shit himself. He was gruff. Like, not bad, like not mean, but he worked hard and he was rough around the edges and he was no bullshit. And that's not the typical type of person that would be socializing in the social elite. That's how I'd be
if I was a fucking millionaire.
Oh, God, me too. I'd be
I mean, don't get me wrong. You would know that I have money, but I'd still be fucking ghetto.
Oh no,
like
you knew he had money. This motherfucker wore white suits.
Okay, Dad wore a white fucking
no,
suit
like,
for prom,
but like,
and he was poor as shit.
Like, but you know, the white suit thing like makes people think you have money. But
in what world?
In every world.
I've never heard that.
Every world, actually. Because white suits are, first of all, not nearly as common as black suits. So it's a little bit harder sometimes. And they're normally more expensive. A white suit is normally more expensive. But he wore like not a tuxedo. Like everyday fucking outfit was a white fucking suit. Okay.
In Texas.
In fucking Texas. And again, his daughter grew up as this person who owned horses and did horse racing, which is all very expensive stuff. So all I know is that even though it doesn't say on paper that John killed Joan, John definitely killed Joan. John killed Joan and Ash killed John by the hands of Bobby, who got killed by the sheriff. Again,
if y'all think different, let us know.
Intermingle tiny little fucking thing. I don't even know what I'm trying to say right now. Anyways, that's the story of John and Joan Hill. And again, these ones are kind of fun for me because they're the older ones, so you know it is what it is. But let us know what you think. Let us know, do you think that John killed Joan, and do you think that Ash killed John via Bobby? Like, and we all know the sheriff killed Bobby because he already said so. Like, he said straight up, like, yeah, I shot that motherfucker dead because he was lying about who he was. Which, again, don't mess with Texas, bitches. This shit's not new. This is from the 60s. And they be killing people because they don't know who they are. Like, that's just what they do. Anyways, if you like these kind of things, keep following us. Make sure that if you are new, because we get new listeners every week. If you're listening to this new and you haven't clicked the plus or the follow button or the whatever, do that, because it will literally pop up on your phone or on whatever you're listening to us on and say, hey, Crime Bitches has a new episode out. And then you can just click on it and listen to it whenever you want to. I don't have anything else to say. So I guess I'm just going to let y'all know that I'll be catching you all on the flip side, bitches.
Bye, bitches.